Hey everybody, I want to sound off on some not so talked about aspects of the whole Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial that's going on. These are things that, because I've lived in Texas my entire life, these are details that I heard during Amber's testimony that are not being discussed and talked about. And I'm going to talk about how these details sort of weave themselves into potentially probably an enormous part of her borderline disorders that either nobody just talked about or have thought about. Again, this is just my opinion as a Texan and somebody who's gone through narcissistic abuse and studied and researched all these cluster B disorders. I'm no Shannon Curry. However, I have been dealing with cluster B disordered people my entire life. It runs in both sides of my family. And both sides of my family are from Texas. And one side of my family are farming people, country people. And that's going to directly come into play here in just a minute. So before I get into these things, just a reminder about what borderline personality disorder actually is. It's far worse than the name suggests. I remember the first time I heard it, when somebody said, I have borderline personality disorder, I thought at the tender age of 24 that meant you were boring, right? Borderline personality. You barely have a personality. I had no idea what it meant. And this was back in 2004 when the internet was not what it is today. There was not you couldn't really just go look into these things very easily, right? So that was my first major serious relationship that I ever had at 24. Yes, I know. But over the years, I have come to learn and understand quite a bit about them. Because if you don't understand these things, good luck with life, right? So with borderline personality disorder, what it actually is, the term borderline comes from the fact that the people with these disorders psychologically are right on the borderline between a psychosis and a neurosis. Now, what does that mean? It means that's actually not a very pleasant mental place to be. Neurosis, if you don't know, for all intents and purposes, it's like excessive nervous energy, right? So things like anxiety, for example, nervous tics, overexcitement, matters of stimulation and overstimulation, things of that nature, right? The people who are wired, right? But not in any kind of particularly good way. Right? Think of like a Steve Irwin, but without good intentions. Yeah, that's neurosis. Now, psychosis is in the realm of hallucinations, delusions, misreading of social situations, poor interpretation of reality, those types of things. So imagine a not so benevolent Steve Irwin who is hallucinating. That's what you get, right? And for people with this disorder, especially if they don't know that they have it, or furthermore, let's say they are diagnosed, as is Amber Heard, but they choose not to accept the diagnosis or believe it, because that also goes hand in hand with it. Right? Psychosis. No, the problem's not me. I'm not imagining these things, right? It is very difficult to manage and handle and treat. And it's very difficult to be around when it happens. It is not curable, but it is manageable. In my coming to understand it, I've actually come to know that quite a few people close to me have been diagnosed with it and have been secretly managing it over the years. And I've had conversations with them about it, and they're very candid and open and honest. And it has really just brought a wealth of understanding to my existence. I no longer categorize them as demons and evil people, but on the other hand, the way that my understanding has evolved is the people who are undiagnosed and the people who maybe have been diagnosed and choose to reject that diagnosis, they can and often are very evil and bad people, right? So I just want to draw that distinction there. The people who understand their diagnosis and who put in all the hard work and effort, and it is a lot of hard work and a lot of effort to manage something like borderline personality disorder, because you have to understand and realize at any given time you may not actually understand the situation you're in, and things may not be nearly as threatening as what your body's telling you, and you have to talk yourself through things an awful lot. It is a very exhausting disorder to manage, so I'm just going to put that information out there because it's going to be relevant here in a minute. So that's about borderline disorder. Histrionic disorder arises when somebody with borderline disorder starts trying to cope with these things that are clearly happening in their lives. You can hear it anecdotally when somebody's a borderline, when they say something like, you know what, it doesn't matter. Anytime I get close to somebody, I always end up screwing it up. They always end up leaving me. I always end up fucking up. You hear it when people say things like that. When people who are histrionic, oftentimes, or I guess let me say this, people who grow up borderline often grow up in family environments where there is a notable lack of control. In other words, the adults don't have it together, right? A lot of it comes from the dynamic of, shit rolls downhill, right? So dad comes home, he had a bad day at the office, comes home, yells at his wife for not doing the laundry, right? Mom gets mad, asks the children if they've done their homework. The kids haven't, and the kids haven't cleaned their room. So then mom yells at the kids, and then the kids are upset. So the older kid gets mad at the younger sibling, right? Say the middle child, and the middle child passes it down to the baby, and then the youngest one, who knows, whatever it is they do, right? So there is this, growing up, there is this lack of a controlled environment that causes children to constantly be on edge. If they never learn how to properly deal with chaos, the chaos of life and adversity, because it's very difficult for children to process the concept of, my parents love me, these adults are the people who protect me, these are my biological parents, they're the ones who would sacrifice their lives for me without question, they're my ultimate guardians, they are my ultimate protectors, and they're also my abusers, and they're the ones who make my life a living hell, and they're the ones who hurt me constantly and the ones who beat me. It's very difficult for children to process that. It's more than just difficult, it is enormously damaging to children. So there's that. And so children grow up in this lack of a controlled environment, and so their priority becomes ways of gaining control over the situation as an antidote to the chaos in their lives. Yes, I'm borrowing that phrase from Jordan Peterson, an antidote to chaos, right? But they start looking for ways to exercise some control over their lives, and this oftentimes starts during the teenage years, right? How can I bring about control? One way is to just be the best at whatever it is you do, right? So you see this in all of the kids who are high achieving children. They try their best to do their best and to be the best, because that makes their parents happy, and that is a cure to the chaos of their lives. What's her face? I don't know her name, but the girl from Toddlers and Tiaras, one of the Toddlers and Tiara girls just committed suicide at 16. No doubt because of all the pressure that she felt having to perform and to be good at everything. And no doubt because her performances directly impacted the stability of her home, right? That's a lot of pressure to put on a kid, okay? So with Amber Heard having histrionic personality disorder, she's probably the type that has learned that when everybody is paying attention, people behave, right? Like kids in a classroom, right? A classroom without a teacher is very disorderly. The kids are misbehaving and doing things that they shouldn't supposed to, or they're not supposed to, sorry. And then the teacher walks in, and what does the class do? They behave, right? Because of the attention. And so with histrionic personality disorder, there's a seeking of attention, because when people are paying attention, people behave, right? And there's a lot more to it, but that's essentially it, is when people are paying attention, everyone behaves, right? So that's histrionic disorder. So now that I've given you all of that, I know I went a little longer than I expected, but how does all of this tie into Amber Heard? In her testimony, she talks about growing up here in Texas, and there's some things here in Texas that I think probably a lot of people missed or overlooked, right? She said that she grew up, her dad worked with horses, right? So she's an equestrian child. Equestrian is things like horses, I think maybe cattle as well, right? Whether or not they're equestrian or bovine or both, I'm not exactly sure how they all tie in. But anyways, works with large animals. And so her dad broke horses, which means getting a very, very large animal to respect you and to be submissive to you, right? So it's gaining control over a large, uncontrollable animal, okay? So whenever you combine that with a need to control as an antidote to chaos, you can get somebody like Amber Heard. One of the ways that you break horses, and if you're on the bovine side of things or the ranching side of things, bulls, for example, right? We all see rodeos where somebody hops on top of a bull and it bucks the guy off, right? That's a crazy thing. But not all bulls are like that. The people who actually do ranching, the bulls are actually rather timid and docile and friendly, right? So, but they can get upset pretty quick. So the way that you get a animal like a bull to respect you and fear you and basically just see you as not somebody to be messed with, you take a bull and you put them in a pen and you let them see how the gate works, right? You open the gate, you close the gate, they see the gate open and closed, you put them in this pen, and an angry bull is going to sit there and it's going to attack the pen. It's going to kick the gate over and over, trying to open the gate. It's going to kick the pen walls. It's going to expend a lot of energy and anger and rage trying to break out of this prison. And once you've allowed it to do that for a while, then you walk up to the gate, and the bull's going to be seeing you, and you ever so gently open the gate, right? Just lift it with a finger. And what the bull is going to think, it's going to think you are like seriously one of the strongest beings in the entire planet, because this gate that it kicked repeatedly with all of its strength didn't even budge. And then here you come and you barely lift a finger and the gate opens right up. That's going to blow the bull's mind, and it's going to get that bull's attention. And at that point, that bull doesn't know what the hell's about to happen when you come in, but it's going to behave. Okay? And so when you're around large animals, such as horses, especially breaking wild horses, right? Because these are not pet horses. These are horses that come in out of the wild, and you have to let them know who you are, and you have to let them know that you're the one in control, right? Is this making sense yet? When you combine something like that with Amber Heard and somebody with a cluster B disorder who grows up in an environment where there's a lack of control, followed by a need to exert control over a situation, right? You see how all of these things are tying in, okay? And I think that's a detail that a lot of people overlook, because at least here in Texas, when you meet somebody that says that they break horses, or they work with horses, or they work with cattle and bulls, you understand what these people actually do for a living. But I think if you're not from a rural country area where that's part of culture, I think that detail can be overlooked. So you get somebody like Amber Heard and Johnny Depp together. You know, Johnny Depp is no saint, and don't get me wrong, I'm team Johnny for the most part, right? But as with all things in life, the truth is never the simple, straightforward answer, right? There's a lot of people online who are like, yeah, go team Johnny. Amber's evil, she's the abuser. Johnny's innocent, Johnny wins. You know, and that's probably true. However, the truth is oftentimes far more complicated and weird and boring than that, right? What you have is Johnny Depp clearly has his own personal battles. Johnny battles addiction, which is a very nice, polite way of saying he abuses drugs. He abuses drugs. Abuses drugs, right? So he is a drug abuser, not necessarily a human abuser, but still, right? And so you have this element, this uncontrollable element of drug abuse and the drama that can create. And you combine that with somebody like a borderline person. That borderline person is going to begin to attempt to exert fierce, tyrannical control over the chaos in an attempt to bring order back to their lives, okay? Don't mistake that as a justification. That is just a motivation, okay? So the chaos that entered her life with Johnny was probably a substantially enormous amount of chaos that she was not prepared to deal with. She already shows signs of not being able to deal with chaos in her previous relationships, right? She got arrested for domestic violence previously, but no charges were filed. The charges were dropped. That is what it is. You know, I'm not going to speculate as to all the little minor details of that, because it's irrelevant, really. You know, when somebody abuses drugs, it can be for any number of reasons. But one common reason is that they are attempting to escape in a reality, right? It's escapism, or they're trying to deaden a feeling or an emotion, right? So when somebody's trying to escape reality, and you pair that with somebody who is trying to control a situation, you're not allowing somebody to escape what they want to escape, right? And you're introducing chaos to somebody who naturally seeks control as an antidote. Well, you're going to run into trouble there. And, you know, with Amber up on the the stand, and all of the lies that she was telling, etc., you know, understand this about borderline personality disorder. If she were was known as a neurotypical person, right? Somebody with no personality disorders, that would be a very evil, very conniving, manipulative thing to do. And because it is, right? But with borderline personality disorder, mind you, they're split between simultaneous neurosis and psychosis. And what happens during a borderline episode is the very structure and fabric of objective reality breaks down. And it breaks down because there has to be a reorganization of reality in order to navigate their way out of the borderline episode, right? So once you're in a delusion, in a heightened state of neurosis, you're in an irrational state of mind. You're not objective. And so the only way to navigate out of a mental state like that is that objective reality has to go out the window. You know, and they have to find an irrational path out of it. And unless you know these things, as a borderline, you just, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to properly get out of these mental states. And what happened to Amber Heard on the stand, I have seen over and over and over in my childhood, where it's a past event. Every time the subject comes up, it's always retold in a different way than it was before, right? So whatever happens, happens. And then every time it's brought up and discussed, it's always discussed in a different way. It's always characterized in a different way. You can never have the same conversation twice with somebody who is at fault, right? So when somebody's at fault and you confront them about it, they're going to defend themselves in a certain way. Then later on, when you confront them again, it's a different point in time. They're in a different emotional state. They're going to be in a different borderline episode. And so they're going to defend themselves and carry on a completely different narrative. And I've done this over and over and over in my family. This happened with my grandmother, right? This happened with my father. This happened with my other grandmother and my uncles and my aunts, right? And cousins, right? Because when you grow up with that being the norm, that's just what you do, right? So it's very difficult to break out of that. You know, the whole joke about Amber Heard talking about my dog stepped on a bee, right? Like, that is very clearly, in my mind at least, because I've seen that before, that's that element of a psychosis coming into play, right? Psychosis, delusions, hallucinations, right? It was an unpleasant, uncomfortable, psychotic little miniatures, psychosis sprinkles, we'll call it, right? And the face she made, that's the neurosis. You can see the neurosis and the psychosis combining in Amber Heard's testimony, where she's saying all of these things that don't make sense. They're not objective. They're not consistent, with highly variant neurotic activity. The weird faces she makes, you know, all of these things. So, you know, they both have their demons that they need to face. They really do. This is how you end up in situations like this. The last thing that I will say is that despite Johnny being one of the nicest people in Hollywood, there is still going to be an intrinsic level of narcissism that just comes with being a celebrity and being a movie star and having a lot of money. There has to be, right? And you do see it in his testimonies, right? There's a lot of gotcha moments, you know, in one way, like it's humorous and it's funny, and we all laugh at the jokes Johnny makes on the stand and the way that he deals with it. But also remember that with narcissists, they're either in complete control or they are the victims, right? And so, but Johnny is clearly being cast as the victim here. But let's not forget that there may also very well be another side to this, because they are both people who either have to be large and in charge, or they both have to be victims, okay? And I stand by my opinion that I don't think either of them is nearly as big of a victim as they claim to be. I think Amber was more physically violent, yes, obviously. But just as a good mental exercise, just imagine the situation as if Johnny Depp actually did do some abusive things and is now getting away with it on account of Amber Heard's borderline disorders and her inability to objectively retell what happened. Okay? That's not necessarily what I think is going on, but it's a useful perspective, and it's a good thought exercise, right? Just imagine for a second, whenever you go back and you look at his testimony and things like, where her lawyers are saying, you wanted to control her career, right? You didn't want her acting, blah, 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 this stuff. And he goes, well, sir, how do you think she got Aquaman? Right? Or, when he's on the stand, cracking jokes like, you continue to read it correctly, sir. Right? All of his character witnesses, that are all on his side, may very well be flying monkeys. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. Maybe they're good friends coming to his aid. But if you just ignore Amber for a moment, like I'm saying, and just look at the structure of the life around Johnny Depp, you can quite clearly see the common themes of narcissism and the things that narcissism brings into the world, right? It is all there. It is all there. And Johnny's at the center of it, being the victim. And like I said, perhaps it's justified. That's up to a jury. But I'm just saying that when you blot out everything Amber Heard for a moment, and you look at all of the details and facts surrounding Johnny Depp, it becomes quite clear that there is a strong presence of narcissism. Whether or not it rises to the level of narcissistic abuse or diagnosis of NPD or anything like that, I don't know. You don't have to be disordered to be narcissistic, right? It doesn't have to rise to the level of NPD. But I can clearly see it there. And so for that, I try to just understand the situation as a whole rather than splitting and trying to support one or the other, the whole Team Amber versus Team Johnny thing. I don't think it's really healthy for people. It's not. Anyways, this has gone on long enough, but do please like, comment, or share. I want to hear you guys and hear your thoughts on the matter. And I guess I'll see y'all on the next video.